can change lives of those people around you. You don't have to be a missionary. You don't have to be a minister. You don't have to be fivefold. Every person in here has the power to change lives. And I want to share something that, happened when I was a teacher about, I think it was around 1989 or 1990. I taught severely behavior disordered and delinquent students in a school near where we live. It's a small school with kindergarten through 12th grade was only about 250 kids. But there was a youth facility there that had very disturbed and delinquent kids from all over the state of Missouri. It was a residential facility. So they were coming to our school, and I had most of the kids in my class because I was high school behavior disorder teacher. So there was a boy there. He was only there 2 months. He totally changed my life. He changed what I believe. He changed what I do. He had a very powerful impact on me, so I wanted to share that with you. When I was in the classroom one day, the counselor came to my room and she said, Texas, we're enrolling a new student from the youth ranch today. His name is Mike, and she said, he's very scary. She said he's about 6'7". He probably weighs 260 or 70 pounds. He's on lithium to control violent behavior, and he's clearly mentally ill. He's pretty unnerving. And I said, okay, bring him in. So anyway, she brought him to my class, and she introduced him at the door. And I said, hi, Mike, come in and have a seat. He wouldn't respond to me. He just sat and stared at me, trying to intimidate me. So I figured out that was his goal. Now, he was really strange. He spoke in a monotone all the time. He didn't speak normally, and he clearly was very disruptive. Well, I had him 4 out of 7 hours of the day. Well, at the end of the first day, the art teacher came to me, and she said, I cannot have this kid in my class. He picked up the art table, threatened to throw all the art supplies over on the floor. He said he's going to hurt people. I can't have him in my class. You're going to have to take him. And because I was a special ed teacher and he was a special ed student, I had to take him. So I took him. So then I had him 5 out of 7 hours of the day. The next morning, the principal called me before school started and said, Mike is refusing to go to typing class, and he's going to have to be with you. And I said, let me talk to him first. So I talked to him, and I said, tried to talk him into it. And he said, no, he wasn't going in there. He'd throw the typewriters at people. So I said, okay, come to my class. Then I had him 6 out of 7 hours of the day. Well, at the end of that day, the PE teacher came to me, and that was the only other class he had. And he said, I can't have him in my class. He sits in the bleachers and refuses to do anything. He's disrupting the class. And I said, no, I'm not taking him. I can't have him 7 out of 7 hours of the day. I'll call the youth facility, I'll tell them to talk to them, send him to timeout, do whatever, but I'm not taking him in my class. I can't have him. So he said, okay. Well, I kind of waited for the principal to come in and say, you will take him, you're the special ed teacher. But he didn't. So anyway, I started trying to deal with him the first 6 hours of the day. And so he was very passive aggressive. He never got violent, but everything I'd say to him, he wouldn't do it. You just have to fight him for everything. So after about, I'd get him to do a little bit of work, not a lot, but he was disruptive. So probably about the third day, I went over to him, and he had his head dropped down on his desk. And so I went over to him, and I said, Mike, you need to sit up and do your work. You're a junior in high school, and I can't give you high school credit if you don't do your work. He came to us at the beginning of March and was only there till the end of the year. It was his junior year. I said, I can't give you high school credit if you won't do your work. So he sat up and he said, make me, and he dropped his head back down again. And I said, well, Mike, I don't want to make you. That wouldn't be good for me, and it wouldn't be good for you. So you need to learn to just choose to do what's right. And I started to walk away from his desk, and I pat him on the back, and I said, do your work, Mike. You're a good kid. All of a sudden, he sat up, and he grabbed me by the wrist. It really startled me, kind of scared me. And he said, why did you say that? And I said, why did I say what? And he said, why did you say I'm a good kid? He said, you don't know what I've done. And then he began to tell me all these very deviant, illegal things. This was in front of the whole class, so it got around the school fast. All these deviant and illegal things that he'd done. And he said, and then my grandmother turned off the Playboy channel I was watching, so I hit her and knocked her out. My grandfather called the police, And he said, and he said, I've been seeing a psychiatrist for 3 years. He said, everybody knows I'm crazy. Why did you say I'm a good kid? And I said, well, it sounds like you've made some bad choices, but in the few days you've been here, I see some good things about you. And he said, well, like what? And I said, for one thing, I said, I think you're highly intelligent. I said, you wrote an English assignment, one of the few assignments I got you to complete. You wrote, and you probably have college-level writing skills. I said, the content of what you wrote was totally inappropriate for school. I said, but I said, the mechanics of what you wrote were really college-level stuff. I said, that was really good. I said, I think you have a sense of humor, and I told him about a couple of things he had said that I thought were funny. And I said, I think you're probably compassionate, because every time I take points away from someone for misbehavior, you're defending them. So I said, you're probably compassionate. And so I said, so I need you to sit up and do your work. So he sat up and he stared into space for a minute, and I just went back to my desk. I was kind of watching him, because you never knew what he was going to do. So he got up and he kind of lumbered up to my desk, and he stood there and stared at me and just kept staring. And I said, what do you want, Mike? And he said, write it down. And I said, write down what? And he said, write down what's good about me. And I said, okay. So I wrote those 3 things down, and I gave it to him. He took the piece of paper and folded it up and stuck it in his pocket. And then he started to do a little bit of work, but he was still disruptive. So then at the end of the day, he came up to me and he said, what else is good about me? And I said, well, give me time to think about it. I said, you've got to start giving me some better choices if you want me to find something else. I said, give me some better choices, and maybe I can find something else good about you. So so I said, I'll tell you something tomorrow. So I came back the next day. I went home and I racked my brain. I thought, what else is good about him? What am I going to tell him? So I thought of something, and when I came to school, I told him, okay, this is something else that's good about you. So he wrote that down on the piece of paper. So then a little while later in the day, he came up again. What else is good about me? I said, Mike, I can't do this all day long. Once a day. Let's agree. One time a day, I'll tell you something good about you. But you've got to make some choices so I can see something good about you. So anyway, so we agreed. So we started this journal that says, what's good about Mike? And I just started writing the things down, one a day. But it forced me to just watch, what is he doing right? What is good about him? Because what it was bad about him was so obvious. It was hard to see past that. So I thought, okay, I got to find something good. So I was racking my brain every day to find something. Well, one day I heard him over talking to another student in class, and he was talking about all the bad things he had done in life. And he sounded like he was kind of sorry for me. He wasn't really bragging. And so I called him over to my desk, and I said, Mike, I want to ask you something. He said, what? And I said, I heard you over here telling that student all the bad things you've done. I said, but when I was at the ranch the other day, I used to go to the youth facility after school and spend time with the kids just on my own. So I said, when I was talking to you out there, you told me that I reminded you of your grandmother, that she was always preaching to you, and that you had gotten saved. You had asked Jesus to be your Savior. You got saved. And I said, and that Jesus had forgiven you of your sins. So if Jesus forgave you of your sins, and you're sitting there talking about it when he said your sins are as far away as the east is from the west, and he threw them in a sea of forgetfulness. I said, if God chose to forget them, it's kind of strange to me that you're remembering them. And he looked stunned, and he said, does it say that? Does it say that in the Bible? And I said, yes. He said, then you show me. I said, I'll have to come show you after school. So I went to the youth facility, and I showed him. I said, okay, let's do something different now. So let's have an agreement that every day we'll write one thing in the journal. We can either write on the what's good about Mike's side, or we'll write what God says is good about Mike. That was a lot easier. So he agreed that I could write down what God said was good about him, not just what I saw all the time. Well, he definitely continued to disrupt, but not as badly. We started to build a little bit of a relationship. And there was one particular day where it was a horrible day, and I was in a bad mood all day. I couldn't think of anything good about anybody, not even a scripture that was good. So the last hour when he was supposed to go to PE, I had not told him anything good that day because it just wasn't in me. So he came up to my desk, and the bell already rang for him to go to PE class, and he just stood and did his usual stare at me. He just stood there, and I kind of had my head down, grading papers, doing like this, like I didn't see him. And finally, I said, Mike, you're late for PE. The bell rang. I said, did you need something? He said, I was wondering if you needed a hug. And so I said, yes. And so I got up and hugged him. Then I said, that's something good about you today. You were able to look past your own issues and realize that I needed a hug. So anyway, I wouldn't say that, we had some improvement, not a lot. I did get him to do enough work that he could get his credits, and then he left at the end of that year. So I didn't feel particularly attached to him or anything. But when he left, I got a poster from the Christian bookstore, and I wrote in the back of the poster, one column said, what's good about Mike, and the other said, what God says is good about Mike. And I had it laminated, and I gave it to him, and I said, here, Mike, take this with you to remind you. He said, okay. So when he left, he wasn't coming back to the ranch, and then, but about 2 weeks later, he started calling me, and he called me and called me. It was so annoying. I can't tell you how annoying it was. He called me like every 2 weeks, and he'd say, hi, this is Mike. And it's monotone. And there'd be total silence. I was supposed to carry the conversation. And so I say, okay, well, what's going on? Nothing. Why'd you call? I don't know. So I was trying to think of something to say to him. I said, do you remember what's good about you? No. So I thought I never should have said that, because then I was having to remember all the things I said were good about him. I'd tell him the scriptures. So he called me again. Honestly, if we'd had caller ID at that time, I don't think I would have answered half of his calls. It was just too annoying. So anyway, he continued the calls. I did notice he started to sound a little more normal. I mean, he would engage a little more. He started to talk a little more. And so then in the fall, probably around October or November, he called and he said, my mom wants to talk to you. Now, I'd never met his mom, didn't even know her. And she got on the phone and she said, I just wanted to thank you for everything you did for Mike and the people at the youth facility as house parents. I said, he made so many changes from being at the ranch. She said, we're farmers, and he was a private placement. He said, we had to sell one of our tractors to have the money to put him there for those 2 months, but it changed his life. And she said he's not in special ed classes anymore, and the counselor at school asked me the other day what kind of medication he was on, and she said he's not, because it was the best he had ever seen him do, and she said he's not on medication anymore. The psychiatrist took him off of everything, and I was floored. So she handed the phone back to Mike, and I said to Mike, how did you make that many changes in such a short period of time? And he said something that was so profound. I never forgot it, and it became the basis of what I did for the next 30 years. He said to me, for a long time, I believed I was crazy, so I acted like I thought I was. When I stopped believing I was crazy, I didn't have to act that way anymore. And I thought, whoa. And I rehearsed that in my mind over and over, and I kept thinking, he was acting out of a belief system. He was acting out of a belief. Then I thought back, and I thought, in all my college and graduate level courses, everything they taught us, we addressed behavior. They never addressed belief systems. No one ever said anything about addressing a belief system. And so I just kept thinking, a belief system. Then I kept thinking, if you can change what a child believes about himself, you can change his behavior. And I thought, we've got all these really disruptive kids. What if we focus on a belief system? What if we stop looking at the behavior so much and focus on a belief system? So the rest of that year, I started writing a proposal to the State Department of Education, and I started writing down ideas of how we could have an on-ground school at the youth facility, pull them out of the public school, put them in the youth facility, and have an on-ground school that was designed to address a belief system and just a totally different type of program. So the public school was all for it because it got them out of that school. And so I went to the State Department and proposed it to them because we had to try to get funding. And they said, go for it. If you think you can make it work, go for it. And they showed us how to fund it. So that next year, we started the on-ground school at the youth facility. And I was the principal of it. I was there for 29 years working with these kids. I retired several years ago. But I wanted to tell you some experiences and things I learned that were so profound to me. they weren't hard, they weren't easy. There were a lot of hard things. But when I first went in, I was all excited, and I thought, I'm going to teach all these teachers how to be positive. So, you know, I went over and over the story about Mike. I went over different things we could do, how to be positive. I said, you have to write a positive plan. You are not normally going to be positive with negative kids. It has to be deliberate. You have to plan it out. You have to write it out. You have to show me your plans. Tell me how you're going to be positive with kids. And it has to change depending on the kid. So anyway, we went for a few months, and things were going pretty well. And then we had a kid who, it was the first violent incidents I saw, but a kid picked up another kid by the neck and started bashing his head against a blackboard. And we had to call for crisis staff to come get him off. It was a very bad scene. They had to take them both out. One kid was injured, needed medical attention. The other kid had to be physically restrained. It was a bad scene. Well, the teacher for that kid was a first-year teacher, and she was very unnerved by it and very upset. And she came to my office, and she was crying and crying. I don't think I can do this. And so I was struggling myself like, oh, God, this positive stuff, I don't know that this is going to work on kids like this. You know, because he was a kid, if you ever said anything positive to him, yeah, I've heard that before. He wasn't pulling it out of you like Mike. It was like, I don't care what you have to say. So anyway, so I started talking to this teacher, and I said, Tammy, we've got to, and I was talking to myself too, said, we've got to stay focused. We've got to be positive. You got to understand where this kid is coming from. I said, here's his background. He accompanied a grandfather who shot and killed 2 men. He's got a father in prison, a grandfather in prison. And he was 8 years old when he saw these murders, and he's got all this kind of stuff in his background. There's some positive things with him, so I started pointing out everything I could think of, and I said, we got to stay focused on that. And she had stopped crying, and she actually looked like she was really buying into it. And then she stood up and looked at me, and she said, Texas, I'm sure Charles Manson's mom thought he had good qualities too. So I said, well, if Charles Manson had come to this school, maybe he wouldn't have turned out the way he did. So anyway, and I said, I know a little bit about Charles Manson, and I studied his background, and I really think we could have helped him if we got him earlier. But anyway, so I started questioning. I started thinking, maybe this positive stuff. I said, I wrote this whole program based on an experience I had with one kid, and I was applying it to other kids, and it seemed to work. And most programs in school, you don't start a program usually that you don't have researched. It's research-based, and you've got to prove it that it's researched. And so I kept thinking, okay, you know, maybe this doesn't work because, you know, it's not based on research. Then I thought, no, I'm not going to go there. So the scripture that I kept thinking of and dwelling on was Philippians 4:8. Do you have that up there? It's finally, brother, whatever things are true, and whatever things are noble, whatever things are just, whatever things are pure, whatever things are lovely, whatever things are of good report, if there be any virtue, and if there is anything praiseworthy, meditate on these things. The things which you learned and received and heard and saw in me, these do, and the God of peace will be with you. So I thought, okay, I don't have research, but I've got the word. And, you know, so we're going to stay focused here. Well, we continued. We had a lot of challenges, but we saw some really, really powerful results. So after we started the school, the kids got more severely disruptive than anything we'd ever seen in the public schools. And I kept telling the teachers, positives have to outweigh the negatives. You cannot be doing more positives, more negatives than positives. And it's based on a choice, not your feelings. It's based on your choice to be positive. And I'd have to tell myself that all the time, because I mean to tell you, there is nothing in your flesh that wants to be positive with kids that are defiant and cussing at you and threatening you. There's just nothing that makes you feel warm and fuzzy about that. So I'd find myself, if I had to correct a kid too much during the day, then the next day I would start the day, I'd write notes for myself. I'd start the day off and tell that kid, is there anything I can do for you today to help you have a better day? Help me help you. Show me what I can do. So I'd keep these interactions going. And we definitely saw, you know, a lot of powerful results. Well, one time I got some records on a kid who was exceptionally violent, and I got him beforehand, and he had assaulted a police officer. He had destroyed a lot of property, and I did notice that he had assaulted the principal in his school, so I was kind of focused on what do you get ahead of that. And I was reading his records. It's probably some of the most severe records that we had gotten. So as I was reading it, the Holy Spirit said, raise your expectations. So I thought, okay. And so I thought, that's kind of interesting. So then when the kid came in and I met him, I said to him, you know what? I have a feeling you're going to be one of the best behaved kids in this school. And he went, you haven't read my records, have you? And I said, yes, actually I have. And I told him everything I'd read in the records. I said, I know you've assaulted a police officer, a principal, you've destroyed property. I know everything you've done. And then he looked at me, but I said, our school is designed to help kids like you. We have a special program, and it's designed specifically for kids like you. So I think we can help you. And so he looked at me and he said, lady, you're an alcoholic, aren't you? And so I said, no, I'm not an alcoholic. I just believe you're going to be one of our best behaved kids. And I was doing what God said. Raise your expectations and speak them out to him. Well, he was there probably 8 months, and I had a couple of incidents where I had to talk him down before he did stuff, but really nothing too major. And every time he saw me in the hall, he could say, hi, you alcoholic. You know, he called me an alcoholic the whole time he was there, and I just let it go because I knew he was kidding. Well, one time we were out in the parking lot. I just drove up for school, and a bunch of juvenile officers and DFS workers had driven up, and they were on the other side of the parking lot, and I knew who they were. They had their badges on and everything. So as I drove up and got out of my car, this kid was out on the grounds, and he yelled real loud, hi, you alcoholic. And I thought, oh, no. All these juvenile officers and people turned around and looked at me, and I thought, I'm just going in. There's no way to address that. But anyway, I began to see over and over and over again the power to change lives. And one boy in particular named Gary, who was there, and he was a kid that I did not like at all, and it took me a while to admit I didn't like him. He was probably the most highly intelligent kid we ever had. His IQ is like 158, which is in the genius level, but he was very violent and extremely immature. So whenever he was sent to my office because he was in trouble, he would sit down and yell and scream and wail, that's not fair, that's not fair, I didn't do anything. And that would go on for about 5 minutes, and you couldn't talk to him when he was doing that. So I would just sit there and wait for him to finish, you know, and then I'd say, okay, Gary, and he destroyed so much property, you're always unsure as what he was going to do. So all of a sudden, one day he came in and he did the wailing for about 1 minute. Then he turned around and looked at me and he said, you don't like me. And I said, that's not true, Gary. I don't like your behavior right now, but I like you. And he said, no, you don't like me. And then he proceeded to tell me things that I'd done that showed bias against him. And the minute he said it, I knew he was absolutely right. Everything, because he was so intelligent, he perceived these things. He pointed out all these things that I had shown bias and shown favoritism to other kids. And I was rather shocked when he said it. So I said, that's not true, Gary. Turn around and be quiet. So he turned around, and I felt really guilty. I thought, whoa, he's right. So the next day, I called a staff meeting of all the staff, and I told them what happened. And I said, I've got to think of something positive about Gary. I have to change my interactions with him. So I need all of you to tell me everything you see and know positive about Gary before the end of this day, because I want to start building on it. So I found out there were a lot of things other people saw that I didn't see. So I would go to him, and I made a plan for myself. 3 times a day, I was going to address him on all the positives. So I took these things, and I'd start noticing. I'd start being positive. Within 2 weeks, we had a great relationship, and he was not a problem. He got removed from the ranch almost immediately after that because he destroyed so much property. They decided he was too expensive to have there. But I saw the power of changing your words and changing your interaction and developing a relationship with someone. It took about 2 weeks and 3 interactions a day that I planned, and it was changed. Now, on a staff level, there became a time in which the staff interaction was really bad. We had 25 people on staff, and there was a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes, and I could feel it. People were saying it. There was just strife. People were backbiting, complaining about other people. And one person came to me one day and said, somebody told me that you're going to do this. Now, whatever it was, I don't remember what it was. If I had done that, that would have infuriated the people in the school. And I said, I never said that. I would not do that. Who told you that? And they said, well, I can't tell you. So this was going on, and I thought, well, there's nothing I can do about it, and I can't get the source of it. So when I went to the next school board meeting, one of the school board members said to me, we hear there's a lot of unrest at the ranch school. There's a bad climate among the staff. And I said, yeah, I'm aware of that, you know. Haven't exactly figured out what to do about it, but I am aware of the problem. And so the president of the school board said, we hired you to run that school, so you better fix it. And I thought, golly, okay, well, so I don't know how I'm going to fix that one. So I thought about it, and then I thought, okay, I'm going to do what I'd do if I were dealing with this in my family. So I just had a short staff meeting. It was the shortest staff meeting I ever had. It was 10 minutes. And I read some scriptures in James. I know you're not supposed to do that in public school, but sometimes you just have to be who you are. So I read some things in James on the tongue and strife, and I read things in Corinthians on the love chapter, and then I read the thing of whatsoever things are true and pure. And I said, you know, we need to change our focus here. So I handed out sheets of paper, and there was like two or three names in each sheet in a big space. And I said, I have the name of every staff person in this packet, and I'm giving it to you. And before tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock, I want you to put on my desk every good point you can find about every staff person. I don't want a narrative. I want phrases or words. You write it down. Patient, kind, anything you see that's positive about that staff person, you write it down. And I had their name into it, and I said, write it by yourself. And I said, I want it on my desk by 8 o'clock in the morning. Well, 8 o'clock in the morning, I had a big stack of paper. So I spent the whole day compiling. I'd take somebody's name, say Roger, and I'd go through all the lists, write down every positive thing people said about him. I did that for every single person. And most people had a full page or a page and a half of comments. So then I wrote a cover letter, and I said, we have an amazing team here and amazing qualities. We need to get back focused on how we can change kids' lives and being positive. That's all I did, and I passed it out. And that broke the whole spirit in the place. People came to me all day long and said, whoa, did people really say this? One aide said to me, did people really write this? Did you just write this text? And I said, I did not. I said, give me your paper. And I underlined, I said, this is the one thing I wrote about you. Everything else was written by the rest of the staff. One man came up to me and said, I just want to tell you that I was a major source of the problem, and I want to commit to you that I'm never going to do it again. I don't know how I got sucked into that. And all of a sudden, all those 25 people, we were back on team, and it was because we focused on what was right with everybody. We changed our focus on what was right. I'll tell you, probably one of the hardest things as years went on, we got so many gang kids. They were the hardest kids for me to deal with because the kids appeared to have no desire to change. They flat tell you, I'm going to sell drugs when I'm out of here. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. If you point out you're headed for prison, I don't care. All my family's in prison. You know, it was like, for some of them, it was almost like a career goal. I'm just going to go to prison and be the big bad person there. So it was really hard, and I could not relate to those kids. I thought, I don't even know what to say to them. I don't even know how to help them. Positives don't work with them, so telling them positive stuff, they look at you like you're crazy. And they kept telling me, this isn't even the real world here. You tell me I can't cuss, and if somebody hits me, don't hit them back, tell you, you're going to take care of it. I said, this isn't the real world. If somebody bothers me in the street, I'm going to take care of it. You think I'm going to call my mommy to take care of it? I'm taking care of it. And I realized they were right. They were just in such a different world. So I thought, I've got to figure out how to relate to these gang kids. But I was real frustrated about it. One day driving to church, I was talking to Henry about it, and I just said, I don't know how to deal with them. I said, I know there are people that have ministries to gang kids, and they do really well with it, but I don't know how those people do it. I don't have the heart for this, but I know God called me here. So Henry said, well, I think you need more of God's power. And I can't tell you why that made me really mad. And so I didn't say anything. I just sat there, but I thought, Henry is a man of many words, and he's going to keep talking. And so then he started saying, then he said, and Jesus said, my yoke is easy and my burden is light, my yoke is easy, or whichever way that goes. And so that really infuriated me because that scripture was always frustrating me anyway. So finally I said, stop talking. Just don't talk to me anymore. I looked at the clock and realized it was going to be an hour and a half till I got to church. And he would have talked the whole time. So, so I said, just stop talking to me. So I reclined my seat and I started thinking, okay, do I need more power? What is going on here? So I started, and then he said to me, when he said the part about my yoke is easy, my burden is light, I said, I'd like to see you for one day go sit with these gang kids and see if you think it's so easy. And he said, that's not what I said, but God called you to do it. He didn't call me to do it. I know I couldn't do it. So that's when I said, okay, stop talking. Don't talk anymore. So when I reclined my seat and I started asking God, do I have power? And I went over in my mind all the dreams, visions, the words God gave me to go to those kids. And I thought, but I didn't know there were gang kids there. But God knew, So I said, do I have power? And then, I just kept thinking, okay, I must have power. Somewhere along the line, I must have power. And so I started saying, Jesus, you have been made unto me wisdom. I have to have wisdom. Then one of my favorite scriptures was, in a certain translation, was, I can do all things through Christ who continually infuses me with his power. And that translation always made me see myself hooked up to an IV from heaven and his power being infused in me. So I started thinking, I do have power. I am infused with it. God called me to do it. I have his wisdom. So then I started praying. And the thing that the Lord told me, stop correcting all their behavior and start taking an interest in them and who they are. And I started studying gangs. I went to workshops. I read materials. I started training our staff. And I found out in gangs, one of the things that they really are big on respect. They want to be respected, regardless of what you think of them. And they want their feelings to be validated. So I started, okay, I'm going to start taking some interest. So this one boy who was 14 years old, he had already been shot in the leg by a gang. He had an uncle in prison, a father dead, severe gang stuff. And he'd just come into us and say, if I had a knife, I'd slice your throat. If I had a knife, and then he keeps saying, I'm going to kill somebody before I leave this place. And I kept saying, Toby, stop making those kind of threats. So then I said to him, I sat him in my office one day and I said, is there anything you like to do besides gangs in your life? I said, I know you've had a lot of gangs, so was there anything else? I thought maybe sports or something. He said, yeah, I like to go to church. And I thought, okay. I said, where did you go to church? And he said, well, there was a bus that came through our neighborhood, so I would go to church on Sunday morning, Sunday night, and Wednesday night. I said, well, why would you go to church? And he said, because I wanted to pray that God would keep me from getting killed in the gangs. So I said, well, did it ever occur to you to pray that God would get you out of the gangs? And he looked at me startled. He said, Jesus was in a gang. And I said, no, he wasn't. Then I realized there's a street gang called the Disciples. And so when he went to church and he heard about Jesus and the disciples, he thought Jesus was a gang leader. So, so I said to him, Toby, Jesus never hurt anybody. He said to love everybody. I went through all the scriptures on love and all the good things Jesus did. And he said, he did? I said, yeah. And he said, love your enemies, do good to them who despitefully use you. And he said, he did? And I said, yeah. I said, next time you go home, ask your pastor or your Sunday school teacher or someone, ask them if that's true. Jesus was not a gang leader. So I realized how warped, what a different world they lived in. And then as he walked out of my office, I had a big box of Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer bath mitts. Someone had donated, and I thought, oh, this is great. Adolescent boys aren't going to want this. So I just told my secretary, we'll just donate them someplace else. But as he walked out of my office, he looked down and he saw those bath mitts, and he said, what's this? And I said, it's Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer's bath mitt. Someone left them here. And he said, can I have one? And I said, what for? And he said, to take a bath. I said, okay. So he took it out of there and had it on his hand looking at it. And I realized these kids have lost their childhood. They live in another world. They don't even see reality the way we see it. So they can't understand my reality. And it helped me start understanding them better. Well, you know, other kids there saw those Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer bath mitts and came to the office to get one. By the end of the day, we gave away all 25. All these adolescent boys were walking around the yard with these bath mitts on, very proud of them. And I thought, they've all lost their childhood. And this was spring, too. It wasn't even Christmas. So, you know, I thought these kids, it made me start to understand them. They've lost their childhood. They're living in another world. So then another boy who was in, I'll call him Jerry, that wasn't his name, but he was probably one of the most significant gang leaders we ever had. And he could stir up more problems. The gang leaders have a way of communicating that we tried to learn their communication, you know, the best we could through hand signals, graffiti. They have a way of communicating that they can manipulate and move other kids to act for them, and they can look totally innocent. They can look like, I didn't do anything, and then everybody else gets the fall for everything they set up to do. So this particular kid was one of those who was a gang leader. So I finally put him in it's kind of like the in-school suspension room. It was our intervention room, and we have 2 crisis staff that were there all the time. So I said, you're just going to have to do your work in here because you're stirring up too many problems. Well, he would argue and argue about how he wasn't doing it. And I said, yeah, you are. We can see it. I know what you're doing. So I got ready to walk out of that room one day, and all of a sudden he said to me, I've read the whole Satanic Bible. And I said, how's that working out for you? And I said, right now you're 18 years old, you're in a lockdown facility, you say you have a son who's 2 years old you've never seen, and you're 1 step away from the penitentiary. So how's the Satanic Bible working out for you? And then I said, you know, if I were you, I'd try another God. And he said, well, I tried one once. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, well, I was in a foster home, and these people, these foster family I lived with, they took me to church, and I was about 8 years old. And I went to church, and I had a Bible, and they studied the Bible and everything, but I left that foster home, and he said, I don't think it worked anyway. And he said, why? And he started telling me some things, and I said, you know, I started talking to him about feelings. I said, you're talking about feelings, not reality, you know, and your feelings aren't reality. And so then I said, you know, the Bible said, Jesus said, Satan comes to kill, steal, and destroy, but I have come that you might have life and have it more abundantly. I said, what you have is killing, stealing, and destroying in your life because you focus on Satan. If you turn your focus to the Bible, then you would have life more abundantly. And I said, since we got saved when we were 24 years old, and I said, I've had nothing but life more abundantly through Jesus. And he said, you know who I admire most in the Bible, of all the people in the Bible? And I said, who? He said, Job. And I thought that was strange. I said, why? He said, because no matter what happened to him, Job never turned his back on God. And I thought, there's some depth in this kid. And so anyway, he started saying, can I go back to class? I said, no, you're not going back to class. And so there was another one of our crisis staff that was in there, was an ex-resident from the ranch, and he was saved and, you know, really on fire for God. And he said, can I talk to him about God? And I said, we're really not supposed to. I said, here's the deal. If he initiates a conversation, you can have the conversation. You don't initiate it. Well, all morning that kid sat there and asked questions. And then I told him, he said he didn't have a Bible. So I brought him a Bible, and I brought him this book I had in my office by Kenneth Hagin. It was a daily devotional. And so I gave that to him. I said, here, you can have these. If you want to try to find a different God, try this. So then I left him there all morning. And then at lunchtime, he went to lunch, and then he came back and started a near riot in the school. I mean, he came in after lunch doing this, sending all these gang hand signals out, and I had to call for backup help. It took like 6 people to get him out of there, and so he went up to the lockdown house, you know, for kids that are having a lot of problems, and so he was locked down. And so I kept saying the next day, could you just send him back to the intervention room? I want to have him in school. They said, no way, he's making all kinds of threats toward you and blah, blah, blah. So anyway, he ended up staying up there a week, and I went up and I said, so finally I said, I'm going to go up and talk to him. So I went up there and I said, will you unlock his room? He was in a secure lockdown room. And I opened the room, he started yelling at me, I'm mad at you. And I said, I'm mad at you too. You started a near riot in school. He said, you've had me locked up a whole week, and all I had to read was this Bible and this devotional. He said, so sit down, I got a lot of questions. So I sat down, and other crisis staff thought he's going to pull something. So I was surrounded by crisis staff that were listening too. And he said, right here in the Bible, it says that Jesus said, my sheep hear my voice, and another they will not follow. Then he picked up this devotional. He said, and this is what he says about that. And what do you think about this? And what do you think about that? I just got this feeling there's a calling on this kid's life. And so I started answering all these questions, and so I said, this was a Friday, I said, you can come back to school, Monday. He said, can I go to classes? And I said, no way. And he said, why not? And I said, because I don't trust you. You've given me no reason to trust you. You can go to the intervention room and do your work and get credit. You're not coming back to classes. But when I came back Monday, I found out he had taken magnets and disabled all the locks on the lockdown rooms and caused a big thing, and they had the police pick him up, and so he left. He wasn't there anymore. So I went up to his house, and I said, can you tell me when he packed his clothes? Because they pack their own stuff up, and sometimes they leave stuff they don't want. I said, did he take the Bible and the daily devotional I gave him? They said, yeah, he took it. So I thought, God, I got some seeds in there. Okay, he's gone, but I got some seeds. Well, God began to show me how to change what I said. I didn't realize, preaching all this positive stuff to people, how many negative things I was saying. Like, for example, I don't know how many times I'd say to the gang kids, I am doing everything in my power to help you change. But if you don't want to change, then don't call me collect from prison someday. And the next time I said that, when I said I'm doing everything in my power, God arrested me right there. It's not your power. Stop doing things in your power. I had gone into the thing of my own work, striving and trying to change them. And, you remind me of the scripture that says, Paul planted, Apollos watered, but God gave the increase. Stop making it about your power. And then I stopped saying to kids, don't call me collect from prison. I would say, someday when you get your life really straightened out, call me, because I want to hear how great you're doing and what great things you're doing, because I know you can do it. So I changed that so it'd be positive. I had no idea that I was being so negative. And the thing of validating feelings, not making them feel like their feelings didn't count, but validate feelings. Even if those feelings were just totally off the wall, let them understand that they had a right to those feelings and you understood them. And just a few years before I retired, this was another kind of major incident that showed me something. Now, I prayed the things that God gave me. One of the foundation scriptures that I prayed almost every day and I meditated on over and over and over was Isaiah 50, verse 4. I think it's up there. Is the Lord God has given me the tongue of a disciple as one who is taught, that I would know how to speak a word in season to him that is weary. He wakens me morning by morning. He wakens my ear to hear as a disciple, as one who is taught. I would pray that over and over and say, God, I am your disciple, so I am taught by you. When I get up this morning, I expect to hear you. So I would drive into school saying, I expect to hear you. I expect to hear how to relate to these kids. And I had to get out of my mind my bias, because so many of these kids left the ranch and would go shoot and kill people in St. Louis, and we'd see it on the news and think, that's one of our kids. And I'd have to get that out of my mind and say, I have the tongue of a disciple. Well, a few years before I retired, it's probably one of the worst possible incidents that could have happened, but the administrator of the ranch came to me one morning and before school, and she said, Texas, I need to tell you, the kids are planning a major riot in school today. We've been up half the night trying to find the source of it. They say they're going to steal, everybody had handheld radios. They're going to steal all the staff's radios so they can communicate with each other. They're going to bring gasoline in and matches. They're going to light people on fire. They're going to do stuff. She said, I can assure you they have no access to gasoline or matches. Well, we'd heard lots of times these kids have no access to that, and they'd show up with it. So I wasn't sure I believed that. She said, but I have to tell you, and she said, they knew there were 3 kids that were the major gang leaders that kind of got all the other ones to do their dirty work. We're pretty sure it's coming from them. So we can keep them locked down up in the house, and you probably won't have the problem. And while I came to school with such an incredible peace, I had been praying, and I just kept meditating on Isaiah 50, verse 4, and I said, I don't want them locked up at the house. I'd rather have those 3 guys in the intervention room. Let me talk to them first. And, because if we don't, I'm going to have the same problem tomorrow. I need to diffuse this now. So I had a staff meeting, told everybody, hide your handheld radios. This is what could come down. Look for gang communication. If you see kids whispering, separate them right away. Something's been planned all night that it's coming down. So anyway, I went back in the intervention room, and those 3 guys were there. And so I told them that I was going to keep them all day. I said, because I told them the ranch had said this was coming down, and they were the leaders of it. I didn't have anything planned to say when I went in there. I walked in there just believing the Holy Spirit was with me. There was plenty of crisis staff there, so I knew if they got violent, I wasn't going to get hurt. But I didn't have any plan of what to say. But they started screaming. They were mad. They were so mad I was keeping them in there. That's not true. We weren't doing anything. We're being falsely accused. And so finally I said, guys, be quiet a minute. I don't blame you for being mad. I would be really, really mad if I were being falsely accused of something. And to tell you the truth, I think the ranch is wrong. I don't think that you guys are planning to do that. And they got real quiet. Actually, I did believe it, but they got real quiet. And so I said, and here's why I believe that that's not true. And I pointed out one boy, and I said, you're 18 years old, and you've been here a year, and you've almost completed the program. And so probably in a month or 2, you're going to be leaving and probably going to an independent living program and be out on your own. So that would be so stupid. I know that it wouldn't be you. And then he got real quiet. And the other one I looked at, and he was 16 years old, and I said, I know it can't be you because you're 16 and you have 2 felonies against you already. And your juvenile officer said, if you get one more felony, you're going to go to the penitentiary. They're going to try you as an adult. I said, so I know it can't be you. There's no way for one day of doing this, you're going to set your life to go to a penitentiary. And he got real quiet. And then the other one, I said to him, when you came into this school, you told me you had lost all your high school credits because you got kicked out so much and, you wanted to earn credits. I said, well, you've been here almost a year now. You're going to get credits for this whole year. But I know this can't be you because if this came down, you'd be kicked out the rest of the year and you'd lose all your credits again. So I said, I know the ranch is wrong about this. So I'm going to keep you in this room so that if anything comes down in the school, I've got your back. I can say, these guys were in here with me, and these guys were in here with me, and there's no way they were involved in it. We have eyes on them all day long. And so they were like, okay. All of a sudden, I was their friend. I was on their team. But what I did was I refocused them on, this is what's going to happen with your behavior. This is what could happen after this happens. But I just kind of was amazed. I thought, I didn't even think of that. God gave it to me at the time. Well, we had no incidents in school that day. It was all calm, and it probably would have been a horrible day if it hadn't been for that. But I began to see the power of believing that you have the tongue of a disciple, and God will give you what to speak when you need to speak it. You can change lives of people around you. I can't even begin to tell you, if you're in any type of leadership, even in a family, you can set a tone for others to follow. You can set a negative tone or a positive tone, but you can change by the power of your words. So if you look for ways to encourage people and to speak to people things that would encourage them, you can change their lives. One thing that, I can tell you one thing that I came across in my office one time, after we had done the positive intervention for all the staff and wrote down the positive things and given it to them, I found a sheet for a counselor a copy of one that I still had in my drawer, and I found it a few years after we'd done that intervention. And that counselor had left, so I saw it, and I thought, I'll mail this to her. So I folded it up, and I got her address and mailed it to her at the school where she was in. And she called me, and she said, you have no idea what that did for me. This had been a horrible week, and that just reminded me of all the good things, that I should be looking at. And she was so encouraged. It's like little things. You think someone's got it all together and they don't need encouragement, and that's just not true. The smallest thing can change someone's life. And another therapist told me once, she said, when I got breast cancer, she said, the hardest thing about it was not the breast cancer, but she said, when I went to church, all the people who used to talk to me stopped talking to me. And she said, I've read that that's a fairly common thing. People don't know what to do when someone's in a life and death situation. So rather than talk to them, they back away, like, okay, I don't know what to say. And she said, that was the hardest thing, of feeling like my friends weren't there just talking. She said, I didn't expect them to address the cancer. I just wanted them to be friends with me. But they backed away, and she said that was so hard. Probably one of the best examples that I think I'd read sometime in an article of the power to change someone's life was Christopher Reeves, who was the ex-Superman. When he got thrown from a horse and was paralyzed from the neck down, and he was on a respirator for his whole life, he said he was really debating. He wanted to just tell his wife to turn the respirator off. He didn't want to live like that. Well, he had a 4 or 5-year-old son who he was very active with. They rode horses, they played ball, they went swimming, they did so many things together. So the point at which he said he had to tell his son, explain what was going on, his wife brought him in, and the little boy was standing there, and so Christopher said to him, we won't be able to, he explained what happened. He said, so we won't be able to ride horses anymore. And he said, well, what about baseball? Can we play baseball? He said, no, we won't be able to do baseball anymore. Can we ride bikes now? No, we won't be able. So he went through all the things that he couldn't do anymore. And Christopher Reeve says it was just breaking his heart. But all of a sudden, his little son, he just burst out in a big smile, and he said, but you can still smile, And he said that gave him the desire to live. He said his son could look through all the disability and say, but I want your smile, and that's valuable to me. That gave him what he needed to live. There are people in your lives that you may be backing away from because they are irritating and you don't know what to say to them. But if you change what you say and you look for the positive, right now in the political climate in our country, I know that there are families divided, there are neighbors, there are so many things divided on political issues. And, the one thing I can tell you is if we can validate other people's feelings without arguing, you just go a long way. Well, I understand how you feel that way. That's not the way I feel, but I get it. I understand why you feel that way. Because, that diffuses things so things don't become an argument. If you can validate that someone has a right to feel that way, it makes a huge difference. I don't know if I did all those scriptures I put up there, but, Which one? Oh, yeah, that was something that the Lord showed me that I wasn't doing what I said myself when I was preaching to everybody about positive things, that we ought to give the most earnest heed to the things which we have heard, at least at any time we let them slip. A lot of times we have problems in our lives because God has already spoken something to us and we've gone another way. We've chosen to let that slip and not continue doing what he told you to do when it's a major thing. And God had so dealt with me about my words and being positive, and I just let it slip because I thought, well, the gang kids are different, this is too hard. So, but when I went back to him, then, it just changed things. So I believe everybody in here, you have the ability to change lives, You have the ability to change people's lives. If you have family members that are difficult, you have the ability to change lives. And speak up, you can speak up about your Christian beliefs and not be afraid. When I sent that positive list around to all the teachers at school, one of the things, because my name was on it too, that encouraged me the most is that people said, person after person said that I wasn't afraid to integrate my Christian beliefs with what I did. And you really aren't supposed to do what I did in a public school, but instead, people were encouraging me that they admired that. So that spoke a lot to me. Okay, I am who I am. I'm going to keep being who I am, not look at, well, you shouldn't do this and you shouldn't do that. Just keep being who you are, because the Jesus in you is going to shine forth and draw people to you and to God. So